The presenting sponsor of Communicating Good is, well, no one. This is our first episode and we don't have any sponsors yet. But that's so flattering that you thought we have a presenting sponsor. Thank you, you guys. That means a lot. We hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to Communicating Good, a podcast by Samalot Media, a communication strategy and content production consultancy. I'm the Sam of Samalot and your host. In every episode of Communicating Good, we explore culture shifts, trends, innovations, and current events. The world is weird and wonderful. Let's talk about it. On this, our first episode, I'm excited to welcome a good friend of mine, someone who has walked with me through the fires of life's most significant moments, including the one we're going to talk about today. Yes, I'm referring to the hellscape we call junior high. And our guest is Sarah Erdman.
Hello.
Hey, Sarah.
Hello, Sam.
Welcome to Communicating Good.
Thank you. Thank you. It is wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so Sarah, you are an acupuncturist by day.
I am.
A photographer always.
I am.
Frequent solo traveler who is always either just returned from your last trip or about to leave on your next.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully, yeah.
And perhaps most important, you are actively and happily losing your verbal filters.
Yeah. I'm at that wonderful stage of a woman's life where you just stop giving a crap about what anybody thinks about what you say.
Can't come too soon.
I find it just gets easier and easier every year to say those words.
Nice.
Yeah.
So just to jump right into it, despite our having gone to junior high and graduating high school multiple decades ago,
it is, fun fact, if I may interrupt with a fun fact. I believe that we are coming up on our 40th anniversary of friendship.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because, maybe we should give some background. We met in sixth grade.
Sixth grade, yeah.
Yeah. Sam moved to my hometown, Stevens Point, Wisconsin. Yep. And I thought she was this funny, fun woman. And it's been 40 years of friendship ever since.
Yes, it has. Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah. So we have, as I said in the beginning, we have traveled quite a distance together, right? Gone through lots of, transitional moments in life. Yep. And, come out better for it. And
well, hopefully.
Yes. we seem to have. So, as I was starting to say, despite having gone to junior high and graduated from high school several decades ago, fall, which is our season right now, always registers as the start of a new school year, right? Even though we haven't been in school for a long time. And that typically prompts us to reminisce about that time in our lives, which was, roughly the 1980s when we met, right? And in recent years, we kind of naturally transitioned into comparing the elements of pop culture that influenced us at that time, the music, movie, TV shows, world events, our experiences, whatnot, comparing that to things that are on the radar of popular music today, or popular culture today. And to say we've identified some differences is putting it mildly, I think, right? So we talked about before, let's start off by offering some context, right? Let's paint a picture of what junior high was like in the 1980s. What are several things you remember the most?
Oh, man. I don't know, because, sometimes it's a hard time parsing out, is this unique to junior high in the 80s, or is it just the horrors of junior high? I don't know. I almost have a physical reaction to the term junior high. And I feel like that's when, I don't know, we're searching for, these strings of our identity that we're going to become. But at the same time, girls are really mean to each other during that time, I think. And I think that that's something that just has stayed. I don't think that was unique to the 80s. So when I hear the term junior high, like I said, I cringe a little bit, because I remember it's a time when you're figuring out yourself and figuring out your friends, and it can be painful along the way. I don't know if that was what first comes to your mind.
Yeah. I remember feeling not accepted, being bullied, feeling a little bit of an outcast or apart from things. And I don't know if I necessarily was, but that was just the feeling that I carried with me. But on a lighter note,
I get right to the serious stuff right away.
The important stuff, right? The universal stuff, right? That impacts everyone at that age. A couple of things that I remember about junior high in the 1980s, right? One was, at that time, the Facts of Life television show was very popular. And I, remember the show, but what I remember more is that we all, for a period of time, probably at least 2 or 3 years, tried to dress like girls from an East Coast prep school, which meant we wore Oxford button-down shirts and knit neckties.
Those looks were very in.
And sweater vests.
Those were the looks back then.
Yes, they were.
Yep, there was that preppy look. Yep.
Right. And I have a lot of memories about, at that time, what the classes that were called industrial arts. I'm not sure if they're still called that or if they're still offered at Franklin Junior High, but things like, I remember learning to use the printing press.
The California job case.
Absolutely, because that was going to feature, factor very largely into our lives later on.
Very important for our futures.
The period of time when we ran a printing press together, and
yes.
Very, very important.
In our early 20s,
And, the room was always filled with opportunities to cut your digits off. Unfortunately, no one did.
I remember having to make some type of a screwdriver that we had to wire it in a way so that it would light up at the end. And I have no idea what the purpose of that was.
I believe, and I'm very surprised that I'm going to remember this because I was so bad at it, but I think we had to make a circuit.
Oh, that
wasn't that part of the circuit?
Probably,
The circuit was the lighting up of
our futures as young electricians of America.
Not as good as our printing press future.
Clearly not.
And this, the mention of industrial arts and especially the screwdrivers that we had to use to make those circuits, that brings to mind another memory from junior high, which is the amount of anger that we saw expressed by some of the teachers. I'm sure that teachers still obviously experience express a range of emotions in the classroom. I really wonder if this would pass muster today, though. Some of what we experienced.
You mean when teachers would get upset and throw chairs across the room?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure they wouldn't be able to get away with that today.
Yes, I remember that. Yep. Somebody throwing a desk. I remember somebody throwing a container of the aforementioned screwdrivers.
Yes, I remember that too.
People hadn't brought their screwdriver in on time.
Those of us who had brought our screwdrivers on time,
yes,
were
very traumatic.
Punished by witnessing that.
Yes,
the violence. Yeah,
I don't know. I have to assume that maybe there would be some complaints these days that might ride right up the food chain in the school. Hopefully.
Parents wouldn't be happy with that.
Hopefully so. So that brings to mind then another kind of big question, which is, does junior high, like the experiences there that we have, does that define who we are for life? The person that we become, that we evolve into at that time, is that who we are today?
I feel like if you had posed that question to me a few weeks ago, I would have a very different answer. It's something we go through. It's in the past. We grow, we evolve. But as part of getting ready for this podcast, I went through, to explain to our many listeners out there, Sam and I, we went to junior high, and this was in a time before phones, before electronic communication.
Before cell phones.
Before cell phones. Before cell phones. I just think we did have telephones. We're not that old. They were mounted on the wall with a really long cord.
Recorded phones,
yeah, we did have phones. Thank you, Sam. But, no electronic communications in the classroom, at least.
Absolutely.
And so we communicated by passing notes back and forth to each other. And we were prolific in our communications through the day. I mean, I would come home between our circle of friends with probably 5, 6, 7 notes that we had passed through the course of the day. Pages and pages of notes. And I managed somehow to tuck these into a folder and save them all these years, along with other, the little bits of memorabilia from those years that we tend to hold on to. And anyway, long story short, I pulled those out the other night and started going through them and realized I had kind of an epiphany, feeling like, have I changed at all since then? I read through it and I thought so many of my just perspectives on life, on approaching studies, on friendship, on how I saw the world, still feels like exactly the same to me. And it kind of smacked me across the face in a way because I wasn't expecting to respond to it in that way.
So interesting. So what characteristics did you identify?
Just little things, not just about who I was, but how I tend to collect information and document things. And I ran across one note where I was trying to figure out why I liked somebody, and I couldn't rationalize why I had an attraction to this person. And I just had something in my real life recently where I went through something similar of having an attraction to somebody and not my usual type, very much out of my box, and just couldn't figure it. And the steps that I went through in that note from when I was 14 years old with somebody are the exact same steps that I went through in my brain literally last weekend. So
fascinating.
Yeah. So I then question, have I matured? Maybe it's just me. Maybe I haven't matured at all since then. But it's just, I think it does go back to this question of, do we, those are our foundational years. And, do we build that foundation, and does that stay for the rest of our lives then? And what influences that? I think that's a question of what influences that foundation as it's being built too.
Yeah, I agree. I was trying to think, as in preparing for this, why I have such still strong feelings when I think about, my memories of junior high, right? I have very strong emotional reactions, good and bad, to certain things. And I was trying to find some research to see if people had looked into this, to say, what is the influence of junior high on a person's broader development as an adult? And there was one statement that really jumped out at me, and somebody said, experiences that produce a lot of emotions, those are what create memories. And that time, that especially junior high, but all of adolescence, is an emotionally fraught time, right? Filled with all kinds of strong emotions. Yep. So that kind of connected some dots for me. So of course, those are the memories that have really stayed with me, right? That then I think just become foundational pieces that make up the person that I am. And I unfortunately haven't kept quite as many notes as you have from our junior high days.
You've probably moved more times than I have.
Possibly. But I certainly have some. And I can say that I absolutely had that same reaction of, I'm that person today that I was when I wrote those notes.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I think that I was maybe a little more articulate in some of the notes that I wrote. But lo, these many years later, I still, I think, approach perhaps problem solving, maybe, with more maturity, and some more, I have, some more tools in my toolkit to solve problems. But I think the way, the lens that I have on the world, the way that there's certain things, I have certain feelings about, and that I did then, that I do now, that has stayed very consistent. So, I think the formative years are, it makes sense. That's our foundation building years. So of course that foundation is going to stay as we become adults, and we just continue building on that. So I think we are the same people.
Yeah. I think so too.
So one thing we wanted to talk about, this is another really foundational piece of our adolescence, were John Hughes movies, right?
Yes.
And John Hughes, and specifically things like 16 Candles and The Breakfast Club. And in recent years, it's become, I think, really obvious that a lot of those movies from John Hughes were very problematic. Right? There's some very racist content. There's sexist. There's just a lot of things that society's come to recognize are just not right. And yet those were very influential on us growing up, right? Yeah. So, and I know that 16 Candles, or Breakfast Club in particular, had a very large influence on you at that time. So talk about that.
Well, I was, I think, I don't know if this exists as much today, this idea of, we had these like very specific boxes that people were put into at school, the jock and the prom queen and, all of those boxes, and you had to be in one of those groups. And so I preface with that by saying, I don't quite know for sure what box we were in. We weren't like the popular kids. We were maybe like these kind of, not full on nerds, but maybe a little nerdy. So I'd say that only because I was not like a party girl. I was not a problem child. I think we were both very good students. We were good children. Our parents were generally pretty happy with us. But for some reason, The Breakfast Club brought out the rebel in me. Because it was rated R, first of all, and we were maybe 15 when it came out. And so we couldn't see it, R-rated movies, 18 and over, which is ridiculous because it's a movie geared towards teenagers. But I think, and it was for something as simple, they show it on, TV on Saturday mornings now. And it was, I think, just a little bit of drug use and probably language. And so we snuck into it. That's what we used to have to do back in the day, is sneak into these movies that we wanted to see. So you'd go in and you would maybe buy a ticket to a different movie that was showing next door that was rated PG, but then you'd time it just right. So then you could go in and watch the R-rated movie, like the rebel that you were inside. And so we snuck in to see The Breakfast Club. And I think then I told my parents that I had seen it at some point.
Because you were a good kid.
Because I was a good child. I was a good, honest child. I was a square. I was a nerd. And then we wanted to go see it again. For some reason, my parents said, no, you can't. And I said, well, why not? I already saw it. And they said, well, because it's rated R. I'm like, but I already saw the movie. And it just became this really weird argument that we had that, led me to have this huge outburst that was highly uncharacteristic of myself. So there's still, I think I threw a jar in my bedroom in an act of defiant drama, which I'd never done anything like that before. And maybe there's still a little scar on the wall at my parents'
and a
house
scar in your heart.
And a scar in my heart, truly, from that story. So long story to say, I had very passionate feelings about this movie. And I think it was because we felt so, coming out of junior high where you are put in like a certain box of who you're supposed to be.
Right.
And this was a movie that was, trying to cross over those bridges. And especially for somebody where you feel like, there's such, I think in junior high with girls especially, it's all about inclusion and exclusion in the friendship groups. And, here's a movie that has people crossing the boundaries a little bit more of what that means. And I think that must have deeply resonated with me at the time in that way.
Yeah, I understand that. And I think that the kind of the archetypes of the characters that gave some voice to maybe how we sort of categorized ourselves, right? And I think we have a clip to play from that movie that talks about that.
Dear Mr. Vernon, we accept the fact that we had to sacrifice a whole Saturday in detention for whatever it was we did wrong. But we think you're crazy to make us write an essay telling you who we think we are. And you see us as you want to see us. In the simplest terms, with the most convenient definitions. But what we found out is that each one of us is a brain, and an athlete,
Come back, I'll check.
And a basket case. A princess.
and a criminal. Does that answer your question? Sincerely yours, The Breakfast Club.
The Breakfast.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
That will live forever with us. All right. So I think that's perhaps a good note to end on. Is there any closing thoughts about The Breakfast Club or junior high?
Oh, my goodness. Ooh, I hear music. I don't know. It's one of those I was just having a conversation with somebody and I said the two time periods of my life that I would never want to go back and relive are junior high and the first couple years of college, but junior high at the top of the list. Yeah.
I totally agree with that. Yeah. And I think that anybody who has chosen a career as being a teacher of that age group deserves sainthood.
Yeah. Agreed.
So thank you, teachers. And thank you for tuning in to Communicating Good. Hope you enjoyed this snippet of our first episode.